Welcome back to the podcast. This is Derek Dodds. And today I'm launching my book. Well, I actually wrote the book a while ago, and I just had the book professionally recorded. And so, what I thought I'd do is drop the recordings here on the podcast. So, today we're going to listen to the introduction of the book. The book is called Ayahuasca, A Beginner's Guide, How to Prepare for Your Ceremony. And today we're going to learn about the history of ayahuasca, what are psychedelics, what is ayahuasca, the origins of ayahuasca, introduction to the West, ayahuasca that is, ayahuasca ceremony origins, and respecting the vine. So this is really ayahuasca 101 and the beginning of, setting the foundation for the rest of my book. And what I'm going to do is drop each chapter of the book as a podcast episode. So those of you that want to look at one particular, element of the book, you don't need to get the book or the audio recording. But if you really like the book or the audio, I would appreciate the support. However, I wrote this book to really help others in their journey and to enable people that were maybe sitting on the fence and needed a bit of a rational footing to make their decision to sit with this beautiful plant medicine. And therefore, I decided to release each chapter of the book on the podcast and reignite this podcast, which has been lying dormant for a while. So here we go with the introduction to the book, which is The Beginner's Guide to Ayahuasca. Enjoy.
Introduction. Ayahuasca is a healer. The word heal comes from the Old English word heilen, itself of Germanic origin, which means to restore to sound health. This is precisely what ayahuasca does. It restores health while healing the broken parts of ourselves. However, this healing does not come easily. Ayahuasca reveals the pain and sorrow buried deep within the psyche and allows us to meet it head on. Only through this direct relationship with our pain can we ignite our healing energies to move back towards sound health. I spent several decades of my life entombing my trauma. My pain was enveloped in a cocoon deep inside my heart, and I locked away the butterfly key of freedom. My pain manifested in addiction and psychological turmoil. I ran from myself and hid in the superficial sunshine of adventure and physical sensation. I never acknowledged that I needed help, nor did I want to look weak, even though inside I was screaming for support. In 2015, my mother died, and something shifted deep in my being. Some indigenous tribes suggest that we are energetically connected to our mother's umbilical cord. My mother left me at age 2 and never really returned. She did try to reconnect with me at the end of her life, but I couldn't find the strength to start again. This seed of sorrow in my heart blocked my ability to feel real love, and I learned to shield my heart from emotion and pain. After my mother's death, the energetic cord around my heart loosened. My healing journey started with books and podcasts. I spent time learning about trauma and asking my dad about my childhood. I began to piece together the cryptic puzzle that was my early life. I was pulled toward a pilgrimage of healing that led me back to plant medicine. My healing started gradually with psilocybin, and I started to see a psychologist once a week. After several years of laying this foundation, I was called to a transformative year where I sat in a ceremony with ayahuasca more than 20 times in 12 months. My friends and family challenged my path. "You're going again?" they would frequently ask. I felt judged. I couldn't explain my actions to my rational self, and it took strength to wade through the criticism of those around me. I was being pulled by something mysterious. I was ready to answer the call. Western culture has traditionally used medicine to treat superficial wounds of the flesh and psyche. However, ayahuasca works on a deeper level. Ayahuasca heals the soul and releases deep traumas and pernicious ancestral energetic patterns attached to our etheric bodies. The etheric body is part of our energetic field and is attached to our physical form. Thus, anything that influences the etheric body will also appear in physical form. Clearing or releasing negative energies from the etheric field can bring deep healing to the physical body. Ayahuasca is a magician. I have heard it said many times by both participants and teachers. Ayahuasca is magic. Before taking ayahuasca, I never believed in magic, and I still cannot explain many things that happened to me during the ceremony. I remain skeptical, yet open. Christian Funder said it well in his book, Grandmother Ayahuasca. Ayahuasca reveals that the mind has almost cosmic proportions, and to try to explain exactly what will happen upon ingestion of this plant medicine would be a fool's errand. One of my teachers frequently says, right before ceremony, "I have no idea what will happen." After sitting over 20 times in 1 year, I can wholeheartedly report that it is always different. Ceremony is never what you expect it to be. As we say in the plant medicine world, ayahuasca gives you what you need, not what you want. As Don Jose Campos said in the book The Shaman and Ayahuasca, "Once when I drank ayahuasca, she very gently explained to me. She told me, 'Look, I give to you, but I take away.' So I insisted, 'What do you give me? And what do you take away?' She said, 'I take away defects, and I give you responsibilities.' The plant has a spirit. I don't know what that even means, but it feels right to say it. I've learned this year that my relationship with the plant has evolved. I have come to honor and respect my connection to ayahuasca, and I feel a kinship building as I dance with her. She is a living entity, embodying the magical spirit of the jungle and cosmos. She is introducing me to myself through myself, and restoring my ability to connect with the divine. I know that's a big word, and I don't use it lightly, but it's the best way to describe what is happening. Ayahuasca is powerful and mysterious, and the more gratitude and humility I bring to her, the deeper my healing is. I am still learning to open a conversation with her, pray to her, ask her questions, and praise her power and wisdom. I know it might feel strange to speak with a plant, but she listens and wants to communicate. Ayahuasca is a teacher. All great teachers ignite something deep within us. They remind us of our potential, and they model a holistic way of being. Good teachers move us closer to wholeness. and they help us deconstruct our trauma and rebuild bridges to our open hearts. Much of our inner wisdom lies dormant in the shadows of our being, hidden behind our childhood wounds. Our superpowers lie just behind these wounds, and the healing starts once we hold ourselves up to the truth and allow the light of clarity in. Ayahuasca shoots an arrow of fire into our wounds and helps us start the process. Ayahuasca dissolves defense mechanisms and cracks our hearts open, allowing grief and sadness to be felt. It's an arduous journey, and it requires a warrior's courage. Ayahuasca is not for everyone, but when it is for you, you will know it, because she will call you to her side, and you will not doubt your path. It happened to me suddenly, and it could also happen to you, as said by both Buddhists and Theosophists. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Ayahuasca is a therapist. Ayahuasca is benevolent, and she is merciless. Ayahuasca understands that real healing reveals the obscurity in our soul's darkness. Some people fear ayahuasca, not because she creates scary hallucinations, but because she exposes the ugliness of our past behaviors and holds us accountable to the truth. People say that one night of drinking ayahuasca is like 10 years of therapy. For me, it's been a wonderful supplement to other work, including therapy, breath work, cold therapy, exercise, and healthy eating, that I was already doing in my life. Ayahuasca is like a therapist, but it doesn't replace therapy. We are complex beings, and working with a therapist may help you in ways you never thought possible. If you mix plant medicine and therapy, I suggest hiring a therapist or coach with personal experience with psychedelics. Ayahuasca pulls nuggets of self-knowledge into the light, but she does so like a warrior, tearing a sword out of a wound. Most therapy is gentle. It takes time and requires a commitment to regular sessions. Ayahuasca is more direct. The naked soul both rejoices and quivers at ayahuasca's sight. The soul recognizes that the heart is the doorway to joy, and ayahuasca helps open that door and allows us to regain the throne of love's kingdom. May she call you back to your throne. The history of ayahuasca. To drink yahe is to return to the cosmic uterus and be reborn. It is to tear through the placenta of ordinary perception and enter realms where death can be known, and life traced through sensation to the primordial source of all existence. When Plants Dream. Daniel Pinchbeck and Sophia Rocklin. Ayahuasca isn't a recent discovery. Nobody knows how old ayahuasca is, or when indigenous tribes started using it. The Amazonian tribes that currently grow and use ayahuasca do not have written records of their origin, and thus we can only speculate about ayahuasca's legacy. However, there is mention of a mystical potion used in the Indian Rig Veda from 1500 BCE. These sacred texts suggest an ayahuasca-like substance called soma was used to enter into spiritual rapture. In Rig Veda 8.48.3-4, it says, "We have drunk the soma. We have become immortal. We have reached the gods. We have entered the realm of heavenly light. What now can the ungrateful do to us? What harm of the immortal, O immortal Soma? Grant peace to our hearts when drunk or dropped. Gracious as a father to his son, a friend to his friends, wise and of good counsel, O Soma, extend our lives for our souls. If you replace the word Soma with ayahuasca in that paragraph, it accurately describes the experience of an ayahuasca journey. While we have a lot of anecdotal evidence regarding ayahuasca ceremonies, it's essential that we approach them with an open heart. It's important to understand the plant's spirit and its benefits. We also need to know how the ceremony is traditionally performed, how it has gained popularity in the West, and why it's crucial to respect its origins. Once we're aware of these aspects, we need to prepare ourselves for the ceremony to receive the maximum benefits from it. This book is meant to be a guide for your first ayahuasca ceremony. In each chapter, I will reveal lessons and techniques I learned by working with many ayahuasca teachers. But first, let's get to know this psychedelic drink better. What are psychedelics? Psychedelics are a class of substances that can alter our minds and consciousnesses. Classic psychedelics disrupt neural activity by diffusing through the brain and activating a serotonin receptor known as the 5-HT2A receptor. Psychedelics alter our mood, perception, and consciousness in ways that can otherwise only be experienced in certain dream states or through religious practice, trance, meditation, and deep breathing. This state is not easily achieved, and its effects are transformative. Psychedelics help awaken a connection to source energy and let us drop the psychological baggage of the ego connected to trauma and low self-worth. Psychedelics don't cause users to become overly dependent on them. Compared to other drugs, there is almost no chance of getting addicted to them. These substances have shown promise in treating various mental conditions such as anxiety, depression, and addiction. While research is still underway regarding these compounds, initial evidence has given a lot of hope to people in the mental health research community. Of course, this hasn't always been the case. When we pay attention to the terms used to describe these substances over the decades, we get a sense of how the scientific community has perceived them. In the 1960s and 1970s, most scientists referred to these substances as psychotomimetics, which indicates that these drugs could mimic the symptoms of psychosis by causing delusions or states of delirium. This wasn't a positive term, and it presented these drugs as something to be avoided. Later, the term hallucinogens became more popular. But even this didn't do any justice to their full range of properties. This is because these drugs don't produce hallucinations all the time, or if taken in controlled doses. Also, these terms don't discuss their benefits or potential in any other way. In 1957, a psychiatrist named Humphrey Osmond coined the term psychedelics. This phrase has Greek origins and translates literally to mind manifesting. This term tells us something about the capabilities of this class of compounds and talks about its immense potential when used judiciously. That being said, many scientific community members have resisted using this term because of its positive connotations. There have been concerns about using psychedelics for recreational purposes in healing and therapy, and the US government has echoed these concerns. In 1970, it passed the Controlled Substances Act, which placed all psychedelics in the most restrictive category of drugs. Schedule 1 drugs are substances that don't have any known medical benefits and have a very high probability of being abused. When this law was passed, it became virtually impossible to research psychedelics and their healing properties. President Nixon's war on drugs drove psychedelics into the closet for several decades. And it appears humanity is waking up to a new psychedelic paradigm as I write these words. In the last few decades, there has been a growing body of research, especially concerning psilocybin, a naturally occurring psychedelic compound found in magic mushrooms, which shows that we might have underestimated the effect of psychedelics in healing and therapy. These studies are gaining popularity, and we are entering a new era of psychedelic acceptance by the medical community. The fact that tightly controlled studies by reputed institutions and laboratories are being sponsored and given credence by the scientific community gives us hope for the future. In many ways, psychedelics are seeing a resurgence in the collective consciousness, but this time in a positive manner. Researchers and scientists caution against excessive enthusiasm regarding psychedelics, because we still have a long way to go toward establishing these substances as appropriate for widespread use. Yet the future looks promising. After 20 years of working with plant medicine, I propose that this medicine is what humanity needs to heal in a time of disconnection and disassociation. What is ayahuasca? Ayahuasca is a plant-based psychedelic tea that different indigenous groups in the Amazon have traditionally brewed, also called ayahuasca, yaje, yage, vegetal, natema, uni, or caapi, depending on the different regions and cultures where it's used. It's made from the bark and stem of the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, along with other ingredients. There are at least 2 parts involved in the making of this tea. The first one is the vine, which doesn't have psychedelic properties. It's a source of an alkaloid called harmine, which acts as a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, or MAOI, which prevents the main psychoactive ingredient, DMT, from breaking down in the digestive tract. This way, DMT can reach the bloodstream and the brain, allowing us to experience its psychedelic properties. The stems and bark of this vine are usually boiled with the second ingredient, the leaves of Psychotria viridis, Psychotria carthagenensis, or Diplopteris cabrerana. These plants contain the psychoactive component responsible for the psychedelic properties of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca has been used for centuries by First Nations peoples from contemporary Peru, Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador for religious ritual and therapeutic purposes. I am so grateful to these communities for sharing ayahuasca with the world and giving the West access to this medicine. Let's take a moment to give gratitude to First Nations peoples. Etymology and significance. Even though the West has appropriated these ancient traditions, the word ayahuasca gives us a hint regarding its origins and significance. It belongs to the Quechua language, an indigenous language family spoken by people residing in the Peruvian Andes. In Quechua, Aya means soul or spirit, and huasca stands for rope or vine. Ayahuasca is the vine of the spirit, or vine of the dead. This term tells us how sacred the vine and its properties are considered to be by the indigenous. Besides the various, usually pejorative, terms that have been used to describe psychedelics over the years I mentioned earlier, there's another term that changes the perception of these compounds entirely: entheogens. It's a neologism rooted in two Greek words, entheos and genesthai. While genesthai means to come into being, entheos translates to being full of God. We can substitute the word God for source, creation, cosmic energy, creator, the divine, higher self, grand spirit, or any other words that fit our worldview. 15 years ago, I had a dream that I was writing the phrase, "Enthusiasm is the essence of life," over and over on a chalkboard. I was both writing the phrase and sitting in a child's chair taking notes. Though I understood the dream, I didn't feel it in my heart until I took ayahuasca. Very similar to entheogens, enthusiasm means to be inspired by source. That dream was trying to tell me that the essence of life is to be inspired by something greater than myself. Ayahuasca offers a similar lesson. The word entheogen describes ayahuasca perfectly. It is the word I encourage you to use when describing or thinking about this medicine. However, I'll continue to use the word psychedelic in this book since it is more commonly known. These compounds ignite the sacred through healing, divination, artistic development, and other spiritual activities. Words are powerful. Words formulate the world we live in. Choose the words that empower your experience and bring you closer to source. Origins of ayahuasca. As indicated earlier, ayahuasca has traditionally been used in healing and divination ceremonies by the indigenous tribes of the Amazon. This includes people in Ecuador, Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, and Brazil, among others. The shaman guides and bridges the material and spiritual worlds in these ceremonies. Visions often serve as paths to healing various mental, emotional, and physical illnesses. As rich as these traditions are, they were largely unknown to the Western world for a long time. Introduction to the West. Around the 19th century, this narrative began to change. Many explorers and ethnographers were interested in the Amazon basin and wanted to understand its people's customs and traditions. Fascinated by what they saw, they stayed with these indigenous tribes for long periods, observing things the West had no understanding of at the time. Chief among these mysteries was the use of ayahuasca in ceremonies. While their accounts mentioned the drink and the vine it came from, they were sparse in their details. This changed in 1852, when the English botanist, explorer, and ethnographer Richard Spruce first found ayahuasca being used in a ceremony among the Tucano people. These people were primarily based along the Vaupés River in Brazil. After witnessing the ceremony, he decided to travel along the Amazon to find more ceremonies like this. In the next 6 years, he encountered these ceremonies among the Guahibo people in Venezuela, who chewed the bark instead of making the brew, and the Zaparo people along the border of Ecuador and Peru, where he learned the name ayahuasca. He soon realized that this plant was growing almost everywhere along the Amazon basin. At the same time, he understood that this plant had a great spiritual significance to indigenous people. It was important for him to depict this sacred relationship in his accounts. In 1873, he published a book called Notes of a Botanist on the Amazon and Andes, which became the first ethnobotanical account of ayahuasca to be available in the West. In this book, he elaborated on the sources from which the drink was made, how it was prepared, and its effect on him. Along with Ecuadorian geographer Manuel Villavicencio, who in 1858 wrote about the use of ayahuasca in a divination ceremony among the Shuar people. This book remained one of the earliest accounts of ayahuasca ceremonies in their native settings. Spruce was also responsible for collecting vine specimens and naming the Banisteria caapi, later renamed Banisteriopsis caapi, in 1931. He sent these specimens to his country to be tested, where they were found to be psychoactive. Popularization in the West. Ayahuasca took a long time to become the phenomenon it is today. This was mainly because the scientific community and the government approached these plants with wariness. The counterculture movement that gained steam in the 1960s and 1970s brought psychedelics into the limelight, and the government created a propaganda campaign that framed psychedelics as unsavory and dangerous. This paranoia made no distinction between the drugs, their properties, and their uses. Ayahuasca also bore the brunt of the ban on using and researching these compounds. It took a body of pioneers, often called psychonauts, to bring these compounds back into the public consciousness. The more sophisticated psychonauts realized that the only way these substances could find widespread acceptance was through a body of research backed by credible organizations. This is why scientists and researchers made extensive efforts to get government bodies and reputable research institutions to fund their clinical trials and experiments. One of the most important studies was headed by psychiatrist Rick Strassman in the 1990s. In these studies, he decided to delve deep into the effects of the DMT molecule on the participants. It took him 2 years to gain the approval of various institutions to conduct these studies at the University of New Mexico. The results were revelatory and astonishing. While Hungarian chemist Stephen Zara had tested DMT on himself in a clinical setting in 1956, this was the first time the effects could be seen in a larger group of people. Between 1990 and 1995, healthy volunteers took high doses of DMT and recounted their bizarre and transformational experiences afterward. These experiences were recorded in the book The Spirit Molecule, a doctor's revolutionary research into the biology of near-death and mythical experiences, published in 2000. This book, along with the hugely popular 2010 documentary it inspired called DMT, The Spirit Molecule, brought ayahuasca to the forefront of public consciousness. By 2007, Strassman had co-founded the Cottonwood Research Foundation, which investigates the effects of psychedelics on human consciousness. In 1998, anthropologist Jeremy Narby published a book called The Cosmic Serpent, based on his experiences with the Ashen Inca indigenous community in Peru. In this book, Narby spoke of the many ways in which ayahuasca influenced indigenous knowledge. He believed that this knowledge predated scientific discoveries made in the West. For example, Narby believed that these communities knew about the double helix shape of the DNA molecule and referred to it as the twin snake symbol. He also believed that shamans could use ayahuasca to accurately diagnose patients and even visualize the specific plant that could cure their particular illnesses. In other words, ayahuasca formed the basis for science and medicine in indigenous societies. This book was seen as groundbreaking research into indigenous cultures because it combined science, anthropology, spirituality, and culture. Together, these books and documentaries were responsible for the growing popularity of ayahuasca in the West. We owe much gratitude to these early psychedelic pioneers for their contributions. The origins of the ayahuasca ceremony. While it's believed that this vine was used in indigenous traditions almost 5,000 years ago, there is little concrete evidence to support the claim. Other sources believe that while some ancient rituals used the vine, they did not use it in ceremonies until much later, since no archaeological or written evidence supports these claims. Most anthropologists are intrigued by two main questions about this plant. First, they are interested in understanding how indigenous cultures discovered the plant. Second, since they had no scientific method for determining the effects of ayahuasca on their psyches, how did they use it for ceremonial purposes? Other questions of particular interest also relate to the lack of sources that mention ayahuasca use in these communities. For example, the Incas of Peru, who ruled over most of South America until 1400 CE, and the Europeans who colonized South America in the 1500s, never mentioned any use of ayahuasca in their reports. This is despite the fact the Incas were known to be avid botanists and had immense knowledge regarding indigenous plants. On the other hand, the Europeans wrote about other psychoactive plants, but never about ayahuasca. This could mean that either the plant itself, or its uses, was an incredibly well-kept secret, or that the ceremonial use of these plants as psychoactive substances started much later than previously thought. While the smoking or inhaling of plants containing DMT has been recorded as far back as 900 BCE, no evidence suggests it was made into a psychedelic brew. Many shamans claim that the knowledge needed to combine the two vines and make the brew was given to them through dreams and visions. In other words, it's believed that the vine itself chose the communities it wanted to commune with. Others claim that the brew was discovered by accident and was used more widely once its astonishing properties became known. The consensus among anthropologists is that the use of ayahuasca as a ceremonial tea began hundreds of years ago. Still, the traditions that form the basis for these ceremonies are thousands of years old. Adoption by the West. Along with the work of Richard Spruce and Jeremy Narby, it was the work done by Richard Evans Schultes and Albert Hoffman in their 1979 book called Plants of the Gods that prompted many influential figures in the West to take part in indigenous ayahuasca ceremonies. This included writers like Allen Ginsberg and William S. Burroughs, who later wrote accounts of these experiences. Many people have started going to the Amazon basin for these ceremonies in the last few decades. One reason is that the substance is completely banned in the US and most Western countries. Another reason is that people want to experience these ceremonies in traditional settings. When it comes to the indigenous communities themselves, some feel that having foreigners spend money on these ceremonies can be a good deal for them. However, many others believe that people who don't belong to the communities that understand the vine on an intimate level should not be allowed to participate in ceremonies. Various churches have started using ayahuasca for mystical and divination purposes, and have skirted legal restrictions. You may be able to join one of these churches in your area to circumvent the legalities. The situation, as you can imagine, is complicated. However, many foreigners have started training under ayahuasqueros to understand precisely how these ceremonies are conducted. These shamans believe that they must teach these people the correct methods of using this vine in ceremonies. In some ways, this is a way to ensure that the ceremonies held in the West are as authentic as possible. Respecting the vine. This section will address the impact our current interest in ayahuasca has on indigenous communities. I believe that before we embark on this journey, we should understand what this vine means to the societies where it has been used traditionally. While everyone can benefit from its transformative properties, we should respect the context in which this vine is used, and the communities who share this sacred knowledge with us. Most Westerners don't have a sacred relationship with Pachamama, like many Amazonian communities do. Many of the rituals performed in these communities don't have a parallel to our own. It takes some time to feel into the ceremonial space. When I first started attending the ayahuasca ceremony, I always wanted to get something from it. What is in it for me is a common mantra of our culture. But something shifted when I realized that the ceremony was an active prayer, an opportunity to gather with my brothers and sisters in communion. Much of the music rooted in these ceremonies comes from the indigenous communities of the Amazon. The music played in most of these rituals has a deep meaning for the shaman. Icaros are traditional songs played during ceremonies that offer reverence and protection. These songs carry the life force of each shaman who performs them, and the magical energy of oral traditions passed down for generations. The ceremony is a prayer. Be mindful of the song lyrics during the ceremony, and let them penetrate your heart as you listen to each note. It's true that we might want to have these experiences for spiritual or therapeutic reasons, but these ceremonies are a part of the traditional culture of many communities. It isn't simply something they do for a day or two. They are immersed in these sacred conversations with ayahuasca and other plants. In a later chapter, we'll discuss the importance of choosing a proper retreat for our experience. While one reason for this is that we should ensure that the guides are properly trained, the other is not blindly believing anything they might tell us. There have been instances where tricksters posing as shamans have made people participate in activities that have nothing to do with the ceremony itself. Since we don't know what happens in these ceremonies, we might believe people are trying to dupe us or even abuse us. Not all Amazonian communities are related to ayahuasca ceremonies. This is why it's essential to understand a shaman's lineage. We can't understand all the intricacies of these ceremonies, nor can we be completely sure of their authenticity. None of these things mean we must stop using ayahuasca or participating in ceremonies. There are very real benefits to the use of this vine. However, we should always treat these cultures with respect, understand these traditions, and approach these ceremonies with honest intentions. We might experience some things in the way that indigenous communities do. That's okay. Ayahuasca ceremonies are evolving, transitioning, and changing as they move out of the jungles and into our culture. Some shamans are very traditional, and others are more creative. I suggest you sit with a few teachers and find the style that most resonates with your heart. As you heal and your relationship with ayahuasca changes, the teachers you sit with might also change. Ayahuasca will lead you where you need to go. Surrender is an essential pillar of this journey. Surrender to the divine and the vine, and she will take you to places you have never imagined. As my teacher, Natasha, said recently in our ceremony, manifesting into the unknown is a decisive surrender of trust and magic.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed that. Next week, we'll drop chapter 1 of the book called Meeting the Vine. We'll talk about how ayahuasca affects the brain. We'll look at research on ayahuasca. We'll look at the benefits, the physical risks, and the psychological risks. So stay tuned. We'll see you next week.